Good morning. Welcome newcomers, members, friends to our worship service at Central Unitarian Church, and happy Mother's Day. My name is Josef Machac, and I will be your worship associate this morning. My wife and I first came to CUC 30 years ago at the invitation of our longtime friends and neighbors. We have been coming to CUC regularly since then, along with our daughters who grew up in our RE program and were eventually married to their spouses by Unitarian ministers. My wife and I continue to be deeply involved in multiple CUC activities, including children's RE, adult RE, Spring Fling, Outreach Auction, Women's Alliance, the Partner Church Committee, and Sunday Worship. I may have left out a few things. So again, welcome newcomers, members, and friends to our worship service at Central Unitarian Church. CUC is an inclusive community of all ages, which embraces diversity in identity, expression, and spiritual belief. Many of our members and friends find inspiration, hope, and renewal with us. I'm quite sure that you will find our service quite meaningful today. If you are visiting us in person, please be sure to say hello to one of our welcome hosts, Carol and Bill Hoffman. If you are visiting us online, we invite you to sign our guest book by providing us with your name and contact information. The link for the guest book has been provided in the chat at the bottom of your screen. We are grateful for all those helping to make the service happen today. Matt Anderson, our music director, and Phil Sosinsky, who is in charge of our tech section. And of course, our service will be led by our minister, the Reverend Andrée Cornelia. We invite you to stay after service for coffee, and we are grateful for coffee being available today, for conversation and connection in this same space. As we prepare to begin our service this morning, we ask those attending in person to please silence your electronic devices, cell phones, beepers, stock market ticker tape machines, racetrack results monitors, and other noise-making devices. For those of you online, we encourage you to have your microphone turned off and to have your own chalice ready to light as we light our own chalice here in our worship space. Our announcements are displayed on the fancy screen in the front before service that you could see as you came in. This allows us to share more information with each other, especially for events, without taking up too much of our worship service time. Nonetheless, there are a number of special announcements that I wish to bring your attention to. CUC is joining other UU congregations in our area to support a family relocating to New Jersey with the assistance of Pink Haven Coalition. Pink Haven, which was recently featured in UU World magazine, supports families fleeing states with anti-trans laws. This is a growing challenge to help support these internal refugees. Some families have faced death threats and other forms of violence in their home states. We are joining a fundraising effort which will contribute to the families' temporary housing for a month, as well as their ability to secure more permanent housing. Donations have already been made through the CUC Members Fund and Women's Alliance. Additional donations can be made via pinkhaven.org or by check using the details included in this week's newsletter. Please contact Reverend Andrée with any questions. Second announcement is this summer, from June 16th through September 1st, we will once again hold intimate in-person services at CUC. These services have become a great way for CUC members and friends to get to know each other. Each service will include a few hymns, a chalice lighting, joys and sorrows, and personal sharing from one of our members or friends. The theme of our services this summer is My Passion. We encourage you to sign up to share your passion with others at CUC. What makes you passionate about your particular subject or activity? Has it been a hobby of yours, or is it tied to your profession? What have you learned from this passion? If you would like to speak at one of these services, please reach out to Reverend Andrée at revandrée@cucparamus.org. I would also like to draw your attention to next week's Sunday service. Our youth group will be leading the service in which they'll be talking about their experienced during their visit to Prague a month ago, or they've been talking about it since they got back. I have no idea what they will say, but a little birdie is telling me that it's going to be awesome. And so bring your seatbelts because it will blow you away. And now we have an announcement about Spring Fling.
Robin Kanata from the Spring Fling Committee couldn't be here today, but he sent me this message to share with you all. If you're making a donation to Spring Fling, please do so as soon as possible. We're adding items daily. All the information you need to donate, to look at the catalog, and to register to bid is in your weekly email. And the auction actually starts next Saturday at 7 p.m. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Robin. So busy time, we have a lot going on, but let's move more deeply into our moment of worship. Let's take a moment to turn to our neighbors and offer them a hello on this rainy morning. Good morning. Hello. Good morning. Good morning, Matt. Our opening words this morning are from the Reverend Dr. David Breeden. Here, gathered, breath mingling, thoughts intersecting, we seek the simple press of presence, open, earnest. Here, we strive to live into knowing. Our presence is sacred, our connections divine. In the clasp of hands, in a shared glance, we claim our place beyond thresholds that too often refuse to yield. In words, in silence, in music, in stillness, the performance of our existence call to the beauty etched in every being. In a world too often afraid to reach out, we gather here, in the teeth of hierarchies, in the face of walls built of lies, we rise in wisdom. Our presence is sacred, our connections divine. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, Break Not the Circle. It is number 323 in the gray hymnal.
Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. I am now going to recite the chalice words. I'm going to ask you to say them with me. We light this chalice to remind us of our dreams, to nourish our heart, mind, and spirit, to work towards a better world for all, to embrace the whole of our human experience, to honor our past and our gifts of the present, to create a community where each of us may find healing, transformation, and hope. And I forgot to say my name is Dolores Connors, and I serve as the Vice President of the Board of Trustees. Good morning.
On this Mother's Day, I want to take a moment to offer a prayer, and this prayer is by Reverend John Johnstone. On this day, honoring mothers, we must acknowledge the complexity of the relations in our lives, especially family relations, those most powerful influences. In witness of that power and whatever feelings are awakened in us, let us bring our hearts and minds into focus on the holy and the good. Let us be together in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Gracious God, in the spirit of love, bless our families, each of us, all of our families. Thank you for the mothers who have nurtured our lives and our souls. Thank you for all those who've helped us grow into who we are, whatever their role, grandmother or stepmother or foster parent or even father or uncle. We recognize and treasure the nurturers in our own lives, past and present, whoever they may be. Comfort those whose parent or child has died. Loss may feel acute again today as others celebrate. May grief be muted by the memory of love and the consolation of others. May those with difficult relationships with their mothers or with other parents or their children find ways to appreciate what has been good and to grow from what has not. May goodness be born from any struggles that exist. We commit ourselves anew to the continuity of generations, whether we raise children or have raised them ourselves, or whether we seek other ways to shape the future. May we honor our struggle to offer to all those coming after us the love, the justice, the freedom, the wisdom, and the guidance that we may be able to give. May the blessings we have been given by the previous generation be transmitted again to new generations. Amen. Blessed be. Happy Mother's Day.
As the offering plates are being passed around, we are able to fulfill our mission here at Central Unitarian Church through the generous contributions of our members and friends. Your financial gifts help us to maintain our operating budget, which includes paying our staff and programming. If you are capable of making a financial contribution today, your gift will help ensure that CUC continues to be a vital part of our lives and our community. Our offering will now be gratefully received. Please join me in reciting our offertory dedication words. We dedicate these gifts in service of our mission to welcome all into a home of spiritual diversity that challenges us to become our best selves, to minister to one another in love, and to serve the greater community.
Now we enter into a time of meditation to share together the joys and sorrows of this community, something we do each week as a way of caring for each other. I have a few joys and sorrows which have been pre-written, which I'll read out here. If you're online and you have a joy or sorrow to share, please type it into the chat now and I will read it out loud. And then I'll have a moment where I invite each of you to share out loud the name of anybody else you're holding in your hearts today. We'll follow that with a moment of silence and a moment of prayer. So let us prepare ourselves for the sacred task of holding each other in love. Let us take a breath in together and a breath out. A breath in and a breath out. Becoming present to each other as we give and we receive these joys and sorrows for this community for Sunday, May 12th, 2024. Dear God, source of life and love, today, may we be reminded what nurtures us, the people and the connections that sustain us, in family, friends, lovers, neighbors, co-workers, strangers, all those that have the potential to lift us up and give us hope. We dream of a world that works for all, people embracing each other's humanity, and people honoring and learning from each other's differences. Yet we witness a world that fears the other, that fears those who don't see the world the way that we do, those who destroy each other in the name of their own safety and survival, those who shut their eyes, block out their ears, and push it all away. Yet through your love, Spirit of life, we know there is another way. We know in our hearts that the world we dream about is possible. And it begins when we form a bridge, when we break down walls, when we offer a listening presence, when we put aside our fears and discomforts and bring ourselves together to address our collective concerns. May we be bridge builders. May we be the makers of tomorrow. May we be the harbingers of heaven here on earth. No one person can do it alone. We need each other. We need all of us, each and every day. Blessed be, and amen. I invite you to remain seated for our next hymn, Building Bridges. Instead of doing this as a round, let's just sing it through 3 times.
Such sweet
Today's reading is by Unitarian Universalist minister and activist Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto from their book, Spilling the Light. To be free, you must embrace the breath of your own existence without apology, even if they try to take it away from you. You must know not that you can do whatever you want. You're not a kudzu vine eating entire hillsides for the purpose of feeding your own lush life. You must know instead that inside you are entire universes, milky blue, magenta, and gold, expanding. But to actually be free, you must know and you must fight for the entire universes inside of everyone else. Being free is not a license, but a promise.
Last week during service, I shared the story of a pear tree. The father teaches a lesson to his 4 sons by having each of them travel out to see a pear tree, but in different seasons. So each son comes home with a different impression on this same tree based on when they saw it, in winter, in spring, in summer, or autumn. The son who traveled in the winter, for example, describes a gnarled tree standing stark against the barren landscape, while the one in autumn spoke of a vibrant, luscious tree bearing the sweetest fruit that he had ever tasted. The father informs the son that they are all correct. They all saw the same tree, they just experienced different aspects of it. And he warns them not to ever judge another person or a situation based on just one aspect of that person or situation. Instead, they must consider the whole tree in all of its aspects. And I think such wisdom can be brought to many of the events that we are experiencing today. For example, the war on Gaza and the student protests on the war, which have been organized on university campuses all across the nation. This Friday, the Guardian reported that there were over 553 university campus protests in the United States. Not all of those were encampments, which is what we tend to hear about, but that's quite a lot of protests. They're all over social media and our news outlets. We see images of protester encampments. We see videos of police clashing violently with protesters. We hear stories of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate happening on these campuses. There are calls for university leaders to do more. There are calls for university leaders to step down. There's calls to bring in the police. There's calls condemning the police and police action. There's people proclaiming their support for the protesters, and there's people calling for all these encampments to go away, saying that they're all anti-Semitic and demanding that they be ended and the students reprimanded. Yet with all of this swirling around us, the Guardian also reported that 97% of these protests didn't result in any serious interpersonal violence or property damage. And that means that a lot of what we've been talking about are about fewer than 20 protests. So how do we make sense of all of this? And what can we do as Unitarian Universalists? Here's some of the things that we do know as facts. Because a lot of what we hear, we're never quite sure if we're hearing the whole context or what point of view we're hearing. So it can be confusing, but we do know these few things. 1, the protests continue on. 2, the students of multiple identities report fearing their safety on campuses while others do not. So that's something that's been hard, I know, for me to discern, where's that line of safety. The protests have different demands across campuses, mostly calling for their universities to condemn the war on Gaza and to divest any investments or academic ties with Israel. And we know that the country is actively funding a war that has already resulted in the death of over 31,000 Palestinians in just 7 months. And the White House reported on Friday that the Israeli army's use of US-provided weapons in Gaza likely resulted in actions that are against international humanitarian law. And we also know that these student protests are connected to a history of similar protests going back to the 60s, at least, including the 1968 campus protests in Colombia, where students were protesting the university's connection to the military and racist relationship with the predominantly minority neighborhood of Morningside Heights, where it was located. And there was a lot of violence with that encampment and protest as well when the police were brought in. And many right now are weighing in with what is at stake as we're witnessing all this. Many are projecting that both the war on Gaza and the reaction to the student protests will be a pivotal in the upcoming presidential election later this year. So there is a lot at stake, real lives at stake, and we're feeling like the fate of our own country is at stake as we're witnessing this and either being part of it or trying to figure out where we belong in all of it. Our country is indeed supporting a bloody war, and unfortunately, that is nothing new. Neither are the political movements against them, including the campus protests, as I've said. Yet, one of the things that seems to make this moment different is the increased polarization in this country. It feels really significant. And we've been here before many times in our history. We've had moments of increased polarization, but a lot of people were talking about this feels different, and arguably it's new because of the way that polarization has been shaped and how it works. It's been building, and in many ways has been created by an environment that's now fueled by social media, this creature that we're still trying to figure out how to live with. We hear problematic slogans and names being chanted on both sides of protests that are happening around the war, and then we hear all of those magnified online. We hear people I've heard student protesters refusing to condemn the Hamas attacks. And I've also heard pro-Israeli protesters justifying the death of over 31,000 Palestinians, right? So we're hearing all of this. University leadership and police and others try to blame the violence on outside agitators, which is actually, if you're not aware of this, this is actually a trope that goes all the way back to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose 1963 letter from a Birmingham jail is in part a response to him being called an outside agitator in Alabama. And all of these things that I'm mentioning right now, these words that are being used and this polarization, these are all aspects of vilifying those who are against you or even just people who don't share your views. There's a lot of vilifying each other, especially people that don't agree with you. And we're hearing more and more of this. I think that's leading to increased fear and hatred for those that don't share our views. And make no mistake, there's real harm involved. There's real deep values and many human lives who are at stake. And just look at the war in Gaza. There's extreme harm all around, and much of it is entirely disproportional. Yet there is also deep, deep historical trauma on both sides, both for Israel and for Palestine. And there is no physical or emotional safety when fearing or vilifying each other exists. This week, on Friday, New York Times opinion writer David Brooks wrote a piece called Healing the American Soul, which references President Biden's 2020 campaign theme, Saving the Soul of America. I want to thank Susan Springstead for bringing this article to my attention. Following the theme of this service of listening and connecting with each other, I tend to skip over David Brooks' articles because I personally don't always agree with him, but I'm grateful for reminding myself of my own lesson here today of listening to another voice who has opinions that are different than my own. And in this article, David Brooks examines the writing of Black theologian Howard Thurman and his influence on Dr. King. Brooks writes, Thurman emphasizes that Jesus was a poor Jew living under the tyranny of Roman power, but even in these vicious circumstances, Jesus focused his attention on the inward center of each person. He showed that you can't look only at a person's economic or political circumstances. The crucial level for any person is the spiritual level, the place where the soul is either sanctified or degraded. And he continues, Thurman writes, Jesus rejected hatred because he saw that hatred meant death to the mind, death to the spirit, and death to communion with his Father. And when you try to deceive someone else, even for your own protection, you end up becoming a deceiver of your own, deep in your own nature. You end up losing the ability to make moral distinctions. Thurman argued that the first step toward reconciliation comes when we define the people on both sides of these power equations, when we redefine them. And Thurman in his writing emphasizes that society, a healthy society, needs certain disciplines in order to keep this reality in check of redefining people on different sides of a conflict. So Brooks summarizes all this as follows. To be a good citizen, it's necessary to be warm-hearted, but it's also necessary to master the disciplines, methods, and techniques required to live well together. How to listen well, how to ask for and offer forgiveness, how not to misunderstand one another, how to converse in a way that requires inequalities, that reduces inequalities of respect. In a society with so much loneliness and distrust, we are failing at these social and moral disciplines. And he's also arguing, and Thurman is arguing, that these can be applied to social change. And here's where Brooks makes a bridge to Dr. King, which again was directly influenced by Thurman's work. And he concludes the piece by quoting Dr. King's principles on nonviolence. I encourage you to read the whole article and including all of the principles for nonviolence, but I think that there's two specific ones from Dr. King's principles that I want to lift up here that I think are important. First is the attack is directed against the forces of evil rather than against the people who happen to be doing the evil. And two, it avoids not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of the spirit. It is a refusal to hate. Now, I think Brooks' piece only hints at some of the ways that could be applied to our context in May 2024. And while his article doesn't directly mention the student protests, his piece is worth considering in this context. And I constantly had it in mind as I was reading this piece, maybe because I was already preparing for the sermon, but it seems applicable to me. And I think part of the reason why it's applicable is because the vast majority of these protests are nonviolent. They are disruptive for sure, but we have to remember that's the purpose of nonviolent protest, right? Sometimes I hear people talking about Dr. King and his work in the past as if disruption shouldn't happen. And I think it's real easy to read some of the words in David Brooks' articles and make it sound like he's trying to say we should all just get along and be happy together. But he's talking about something deeper, which is how we work through conflict together by hearing each other and really seeing and respecting each other. And so these student protests we're seeing are disruptive, just as many of the nonviolent protests that Dr. King and others who were taking action during this time, they were disruptive. And we have to remember that even Jesus was not above being disruptive in his behavior in order to magnify his message. For example, a few weeks ago, we were talking about him throwing out all the moneymakers and tradespeople from the temple, right? It seems like this violent act that's happening in the week leading up to Easter, but it's really this protest that Jesus is doing to magnify his message. And the protests in these last few weeks didn't get violent, didn't necessarily start out as violent. Many of them became that way because of the reaction to them, either from police, from the university, or from counter-protesters. And we have to remember that many of the nonviolent protests for Dr. King's time and after have also involved violence, especially because of the intervention of police or other forces or counter-protesters. So part of what we can question, though, through all of what we're seeing is the polarization that exists within the debate out of which these protests have grown and what role that plays and how we view them. If any protesters or counter-protesters focus on the people who are on the other side versus the evil that they're trying to counter, we feed into a continued polarization in this country, and that puts everybody in a dangerous and explosive situation. And if we take another piece of information to look at this, as another lens to look at this situation, we can also look at our Unitarian Universalist shared values. Our latest articulation of the UU values that came from the Article 2 Study Commission and are up for vote this summer at General Assembly names both pluralism and justice as values for Unitarian Universalism. And perhaps not coincidentally, they're listed directly after each other. And so I want to read those pieces because I think they're relevant here. Pluralism we started looking at last week, and it's defined the following way. Pluralism: we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. And in the same document, this is followed by justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of the inclusive democratic process to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. These go together. We can't consider pluralism without justice, etc. And when we've looked at our shared values, it's a flower image suggesting that all of these are tied together and interconnected. But justice and pluralism, I think in terms of what we're looking at here, are really important because dismantling racism and all forms of systemic oppression, such as many of the student protesters are speaking out about against this war, it also means that we need to treat each other in the process as sacred beings, embracing our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect, even if we're in the process of calling out and fighting against evil. We have demonized each other so much in our polarized culture that we are playing it out in real time. And these protests and the violence that is happening around them is an example of how we're playing this out. I'm not criticizing the student protests themselves. I think there's a need for protest. I'm questioning all of it combined, the protests combined with our reaction to it and our counter-reaction and so forth. We need to do all we can to stop the atrocity which only continues to slaughter so many innocent lives, women, children, and families. The number continues to grow. I continue to light a candle on joys and sorrows each week, and it just climbs higher and higher to just an unbelievable level. So many innocent lives, and we need to stop that violence. And we need to stop the flow of money and weapons that is fueling this war. And we need to stop the mentality that justifies such horrendous violence. We must work in any way we can to end oppression in all forms, including anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-Arab hate that happens in both action and in speech. And we can do all this, I believe we can do all this without ripping each other apart. Because the more we refuse to see each other in all of our complex aspects, the winter, spring, summer, and fall, just like the tree, the more we refuse to see all those aspects, that's the more we are able to vilify each other, and the more the violence will spread. So instead of picking the right side and defending it, as so much call us to do in these situations, like the students or the university or the police or the counter-protesters, I believe what we have to do is consider all aspects of what we are witnessing, how we are talking about it, and how we are learning about it. We need to be paying attention to that. And following Jesus' teachings, we can refuse hatred, and we can mobilize for change. We can bring about justice in this world, and we can do so with love, curiosity, and respect. We need it. Our spirits need it, and the whole world desperately needs it. And our closing hymn, I think, is one that sings of this world where we're seeing each other. And I think it's easy to sing this hymn and think about it as being in a room full of like-minded folks. And so much of the work that needs to be done is being able to hear each other across differences. I think we can sing this song together and think about how we can be in a holy place and hearing each other's stories and actually seeing each other as we work through these really hard things. So please rise and embody your spirit for our closing hymn. It's in the Teal Hymnal 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When we trust the way
As our chalice is being extinguished, let us recite the following words. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not our promise to each other, to act with grace, to hold each other in love, to serve this community in our world. This promise of the heart serves as a reminder of how we live together. May it bring joy to our collective lives.
May we witness this world in all of its beauty, without turning our backs on all its brokenness and pain. May we bring an end to our divisions. May we refuse to hate. May we embrace each other with love, with curiosity, with respect. So may we bring forth the healing this world so desperately needs. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Thank you to all on our worship team today, Matt and Joseph and Phil. Thank you to George for providing us coffee this afternoon. Please stay for coffee and connection and conversation, and happy Mother's Day to all.